Welcome to the Astro Psyche. I hope you're doing well. It's so good to have you here. And today we're going to talk about good astrology, bad astrology, and how this concept that there even is good or bad astrology, that this is a phenomenon called psychological splitting. And I felt called and inspired to talk about this with you, to name some of what I'm hearing in the field of astrology, what I'm noticing in the field, and also within my own self. This is something that I think that we've done for a long time in the field of astrology, and that we also do just as humans in general. We all have a way of dealing with uncertainty and ambiguity and anxieties and just the experience of living in this world as humans. And so one way that we deal with that is through what's called psychological splitting. And so I wanted to address this, how I see this happening in the field of astrology, and also, I think we could transmit this to our lived experience and even other symbolic systems, such as the tarot and anything like this, where we're reading meaning into something. So, when I say psychological splitting, this is a phenomenon that happens where we split people, situations, or phenomena into all good or all bad. My little doggy is sitting here next to me snoring, so I'm gonna try to keep him from snoring too loudly here. Uh, so splitting, we can think of this concept as where there is a need to fit everything into a box on this side versus that side. And splitting relies on there only being two options that are completely clear, where something has to be either all this or all that. There is no nuance, there is no ambiguity. And this often means that uh, people, situations are labeled as purely this or purely that, and often as either all good or all bad. Splitting tends to have an effect that reduces things. There's a constriction that happens here, and there's often some sort of judgment or morality that can come in, especially if we're, thinking about things as all good or all bad. And this is such a human thing to do. This is something that we all do at one time or another because it is often anxiety inducing for us to hold nuance and paradox. And it's often very difficult to hold paradox. It's often difficult to hold space for a situation being simultaneously uh, good and whole and life giving, and also at the same time, maybe really harmful and detrimental and really painful. But sometimes oftentimes, this is the way it is, whether it's a situation, phenomenon, or a person. And I really got into thinking about this more recently because I was reading Stephen Arroyo's book. Stephen Arroyo is a psychotherapist and astrologer. He's written several books. I was reading this book called Astrology and Transformation, or it's called Astrology, Karma, and Transformation. And he was explaining how astrological interpretation has, especially in the past and even in the present, really leaned on this splitting where an astrological interpretation and oftentimes a particular aspect or maybe a planet in a sign is seen as good or bad. And he quoted Carl Jung saying that Carl Jung said, the individual may strive after perfection, but may suffer from the opposite of their intentions for the safety of their completeness. So I realize that's a bit cumbersome of a statement, but what he was getting at there is that a person may strive for perfection, for a sense of purity or a sense of goodness, but that's oftentimes there's a suffering in that the opposite of that perfection comes into being because the psyche craves compensation. The psyche craves, um, I don't even want to use the word wholeness because that feels like it's still a bit too close to something like perfection or purity, which is not really what it's about. The psyche craves a sense of balance and equanimity. And if there is striving too far in one direction, often there's a compensation effect that happens, and often that's unconscious. And so, this is relevant to psychological splitting because if we're seeing something such as an astrological aspect is either all good or all bad, there is a compensation factor that comes in there because the astrology is value neutral and we put our meanings onto it. Um, so I want to say a little bit more here about psychological splitting in that it is one of many psychological defenses that we use at one time or another to deal with anxiety, fear of the unknown, shame, and other intense feeling states where we feel, for whatever reason, like we're not okay. And again, very human to do this. Um, what happens is if we use a psychological defense, such as splitting, um, over and over again, and we use it rigorously and intensely, oftentimes because we're experiencing some intense feelings, or maybe we're in an intense situation, or maybe developmentally over our lifetime, it was very important for us to work with this defense as a protective measure. When we really lean into something like this, it creates a rigid structure in the psyche, and that has certain effects. And so, some of the side effects of very intense psychological splitting are these: the inability to see circumstances objectively, because there's this rigidity where everything needs to be classified into either good or bad, this or that. So there's this inability to see what is actually happening here. There also tends to be, when we really are using splitting a lot, there is a potential for a severe exalting or degradation of oneself or of others. There can also be an intense intolerance towards certain situations or certain people. And at an extreme level, this we see this show up via racism, homophobia, transphobia, and religious persecution. And marginalization or dehumanizing people in any variety of ways. And so, uh, gosh, this is why I am feeling that this is so important, especially now, because in in our world, especially, I think I could say globally, but also a person being living in the United States of America, it's very apparent that these phenomena, racism, homophobia, transphobia, um, has become more and more intense and loud and inflamed. And uh, this is also complicated too because America's foundation was built also on these things, on an undercurrent, strong reliance on racism and dehumanizing people. And I feel it feels, gosh, what do I want to say here? Um, It feels really important for me to name this right now. And I also realize that even saying this for some folks might be activating. Um, some folks might find that controversial. And also, I, for me, it feels important to name how um, extreme I am seeing things become uh, in the world and how this is this is political, it's cultural, it's social, and also it is a collective representation of psychological splitting and maybe other things, but this podcast is about the effect of splitting. And so um, I find this really important for us to understand because what we're seeing play out collectively is very human. And also, it's what happens when uh, we as humans feel afraid, we feel shame, we feel anxiety. And when there isn't, let's see, when there isn't a counterbalance and the psyche starts to get more and more extreme again at this collective level, and there starts to get this uh, rigidity where everything is either all good or all bad, and then also that the split gets more extreme. The polarity gets more and more exaggerated. And so, yeah, what can we do? I think this is something that, gosh, I think about and uh, that it impacts me personally. That I hear um, impacting family, friends, clients in my psychotherapy practice, and um, I think that I have some ideas to share with you, and I think that we can work with this phenomena of splitting. I think it's so important for us to just notice it when we see it happening, whether we see it happening in ourselves or in others or in a social or spectrum, broad perspective, where we see um, this severe exalting or degradation of people, or you see that maybe happening in yourself, or you see intense intolerance towards certain situations or people. And we can understand, okay, this is psychological splitting. And how can we also not fall into that in ourselves when we see that happening? How can we um, open up greater possibilities in life in an effort to um, create greater tolerance and become aware of how and when we split? And there are so many different ways um, to do your activism, to do your part of being a collaborative healing presence in the world. And one way to do that is to paradoxically focus on your own internal experience. And that is ultimately so that you can be a, be, how do I want to say this? So that you can be a better human. Is that how I want to say that? I'm not quite sure. So that you can be, so that you can be a securely attached, regulated, compassionate, and well-resourced human. And we need more. We need more of you that are, we need more of each other that are having that capacity. Because when we are dysregulated, when we are not able to be present, when we are not able to be embodied and clear and hear, then we are more vulnerable to getting swept up into some of these psychological defenses that can be detrimental. And so these are some indicators that splitting may be happening again in yourself or maybe in an external circumstance or with someone else. So, and it's this: when someone or something is unquestionably all good or all bad, we know that splitting might be happening. When someone or something is the best or the worst, we know that splitting might be happening here. When we start to use language such as always or never, it's always this way, it's always going to be this way, or this is never going to happen, or they never do this, or it's never XYZ. We know that psychological splitting might be happening. And so, of course, just because you you or someone is using these phrases or thinking this way, it doesn't necessarily mean splitting. But I hope that you're noticing that it's this theme of when it's all good, the best, always, or all bad, the worst, never. When it's taken to this extreme and there is no room for something to be nuanced or different shades or different tones, um, when there's no room for a person or a situation to have multiplicity, then we know that there might be some splitting going on here. Now, I do want to be, I want to do my best here to be clear that what I'm talking about, this cultivating tolerance for nuance, cultivating tolerance for our humanity, and reducing splitting is not about tolerating violence, harm, racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, marginalization, or dehumanization in any way. I am not talking about tolerating harm. That is not what this is about. Um, there needs to be action taken, and there needs to be intervention when there is violence, harm, or marginalization or dehumanization, which I think that is happening a lot, and it is troubling. And I think that again, it's sort of being exposed to such a wide variety of harm that we're taking in and experiencing and being exposed to it, whether that is something that you are exposed to in your own life or something that you're impacted by or just something that you're seeing on the news, I think that it can be it can make us vulnerable to going into this splitting to deal with that, to deal with these intense experiences. And so, um, cultivating tolerance and cultivating a capacity for holding paradox. Um, a part of that is realizing that these actions and beliefs where there is violence, harm, racism, marginalization, that those phenomena are expressions of psychological splitting. And so we can simultaneously uh, attempt to take action, to intervene, to advocate, to speak up, and also hold compassion for the human experience that has led to these acts happening. Most folks who express these types of perspectives, that whether most folks who perpetrate harm often themselves have experienced harm or severe psychological splitting and feel bad towards themselves so intensely that they externalize this badness onto another who represents some aspect of what they feel bad about. So it really is this collective cycle of being human that that is happening. And so a part of bringing healing to this is the more that we can bring awareness to what's happening here, the more that we can start to understand what's happening and embody a healthy sense of self that doesn't need to split as dramatically. When we are doing our best to tend to our own well-being, we can show up more fully in our relationships and those that we have an impact on, either more directly or more indirectly. Uh, and so I want to take a moment to ground this into how we talk about astrology and how we interpret astrology. Um, I think all of this is important. I think it's important how we hold what we're seeing play out in our lives and collectively, and then also other things like how we interpret our astrology, because our astrology and our spiritual practice is informed by the collective and how we filter information. And so, um, yeah, a part of what I've noticed is that we, as astrologers, as astrology enthusiasts, we, myself included, will sometimes talk about astrology as being good or bad or easy or hard. And this is psychological splitting. That this astrology aspect, Mercury square Saturn. This is bad astrology. This is hard astrology. Oh, Mercury trine Jupiter. This is really good astrology. This is really beautiful astrology. And I think when we do that, we reduce our capacity for interpretation. We reduce our capacity for seeing a fuller perspective. And so, and this is getting into a depth perspective of astrology, which is what is here? What wants to be expressed here through this Mercury Saturn square? Uh, we could ask if we wanted to still use the good, bad language, we could say, what is this astrology good for? What does it want? What does it like to do? Uh, how could it be channeled in a way that is life-giving, that is open, that is enthusiastic, that is supportive. So, what is it good for? And what are the possibilities? What do we see here? And then what else? And what else? I think that astrology is really this open doorway that we can walk through again and again and again because there's always more there. And then also, I think this is in place of, oh, this is good or this is bad, is how could this astrological symbol, how could this get distorted or how could this become unconscious? So even something like Mercury trine Jupiter, that can get distorted, that can become unconscious. Um, that could look like, let's see, Mercury trine Jupiter. Yeah, that could look like glossing over the most important, the most core foundational details. It could be getting lost in the details. It could be getting so excited about something that there isn't the planning that goes into it. Um, it could be having such an enthusiasm that the specificity of the words and the language that would support this grand vision are are not able to come into being because things are moving so quickly. Now, of course, Mercury trine Jupiter has a lot of lovely qualities. There's an ease and a flow and an abundance of communication and words and being able to express in a way that's open and free. And so we want to allow for the full spectrum of psyche to exist here in every single piece of the astrology that we're looking at. And I think sometimes too, it's helpful to ask some questions like, for let's say, if there's Mercury square Saturn, how would so Mercury square Saturn can sometimes be interpreted as a feeling of hesitation around sharing the voice, feeling not smart enough or not good enough or needing to find the right words, but then having a hard time finding the right words and so not saying anything. Um, the Saturn being the rigor and the feeling of feeling responsible, feeling like you need to be right to have the answer, and that can sometimes be constricting on Mercury, the voice and the communication. And so we can ask, how would a secure Mercury square Saturn person act in this situation? What would they do to cultivate confidence? What if they felt confident? How would they present? How would they move through the world? And so I really like this. For myself, I sometimes use a variety of these inquiry questions. How would a secure or confident or I really like the secure because I think security adds this element of sureness of oneself that feels very grounded to me. How would a secure Mercury Saturn person act? How would a um, embodied Moon Jupiter person act? How would a loving, compassionate Mercury square Saturn person act in this situation? And so I think you can do this for if there's aspects or placements that you have in your birth chart that are maybe often classified as bad or challenging, I would encourage you to work with that a little bit and see what, where is there some goodness here, and how you can create more space for nuance and paradox and multiplicity in the way that you interpret astrology. And this could be for transits as well, of course. This could be for tarot as well. I think, especially with tarot, we can apply this to some of the cards that are seen as a bit more fear inducing, like um, the Three of Swords, the Eight of Swords, the Nine of Swords. What are some others? Some of these cards, the Death card, the Tower card, these cards that tend to be lumped into the, oh, that's a bad card. And it's like, no, it's it's not bad. It simply has gotten marginalized into this reductive stance over time because we fear the unknown. We tend to fear change. And so it, uh, for the time being, at a certain time, it's helped us. It's helped calm our anxiety to say, okay, I'm going to put this over here in the bad section, and that's going to help me feel better because now I know I can avoid it. Where a part of our psychological maturity and our spiritual development is actually, from this depth psychological perspective, it's actually going into and exploring some of these things that we would classify as bad and exploring, oh, what is there? Um, what is this like for me? What kind of feelings are coming up here? How does this apply to my life? How is this actually a part of me? And how can I reclaim these parts of me that are actually maybe not even bad? I just thought they were bad because society said so or my family said so. And for example, the Three of Swords, how can I reclaim my grief and my sorrow as an important part of my experience and an important part of any experience where there has been loss or devastation or where there has been harm that has been done. And when we reclaim these parts of self, when we reclaim our astrology, when we reclaim our tarot, then there can be a sense of greater vitality and cohesion, and just I find more of a sense of just feeling here and feeling this secure, regulated place, feeling like I'm really here in the world, in my body and in my soul. So I'm curious what this brings up for you. I'm curious what your thoughts are. Um, I realize this may be a bit of a controversial topic because I know that, especially in some schools of astrology, we really like to say it's good or it's bad, and we really like to classify it. So, um, yeah, I really welcome your thoughts, and I hope that this sparks some sort of contemplation in you in your own relationship with astrology or the tarot or your spiritual practice, whatever that may be or may look like for you. My name is Shawna McGrath. I'm a depth psychotherapist and an astrologer. You can find out more about me and my work on my website, theastropsyche.com. Such an honor to have you here and to share this space with you. I'm wishing you well and wishing you safety and ease and flow in your life and your journey ahead. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.